Welcome back, my friends, to Gorman Wrestling Productions with today's Be Kind Rewind Classic Match Review. Today we are going back all the way to 1998 and Halloween Havoc live from Las Vegas. I was about 13 years old at the time. And my hope is to have these classic match reviews to be not only nostalgic for those of us who grew up on wrestling, but to give some of the younger generation, the new fans out there, an appreciation for the type of matches and the type of pay-per-views that we saw growing up, especially this one in particular. And one of the reasons why I picked this one is because it featured Diamond Dallas Page versus Goldberg. Now, if you are a new wrestling fan, or if you are under the age of, say, 15 and younger, and the only references you really know about DDP is obviously the yoga, or even the Jake the Snake Roberts documentary, this gives you a great insight into what he was like as a wrestler. Obviously, everybody knows who Goldberg is now, but if you're, again, anyone under the age of 15, maybe even 20, you don't know what Goldberg was like back in the 90s in WCW. And that's why I wanted to pick this one for our next classic match review. Halloween Havoc on the WWE Network, if you want to find it, it is at the marker, Halloween Havoc 1998 at the 2 hour and 56-minute mark. If you want to find this match. One of the first things that I love talking about with Halloween Havoc is the iconic set. If you guys like those wavy, wacky, inflatable arm tube men from Bayley, this was one of the coolest sets ever. It was a little hokey because it was this big blow-up like demon with the pumpkin with the logo carved out, but I mean, anybody who's a wrestling fan from the 90s marks out at this set. And getting right into the match, talking about Goldberg's entrance. We hear a lot about, him banging his head on lockers here recently on Raw. That's what he did. If you watch his entrance, you see the door cave in a little bit when he is either hitting it, presumably with his fist or his foot. But for goodness sakes, now we might know it was actually his head. But that entrance was just so iconic for Goldberg and kind of ironic at the same time, because if there was anybody in the company who didn't need a squad of 8 security guards and the head of security of WCW, it was Goldberg. Goldberg didn't need anybody to take him to the ring, but instead it was the opposite. It made it have the feel of you had to protect everybody else from him. Goldberg was it at this time. Going into this match, he had his undefeated streak, and they did comment on it. He was at 154-0 going into this match. I invite anybody to kind of take a look at the streak of Goldberg going into Halloween Havoc. Yes, for those of you who are new to the network, that is Michael Buffer doing the introductions. He was the ring announcer for the majority of the pay-per-views back in the 90s and early 2000s. Nobody knows why, but it did. It gave a big-time fight feel to it, so I never minded it. But going right into the actual match, that face-off between DDP and Goldberg was amazing. This was a white-hot match, and the reason being is that DDP was a face, Goldberg was a face. WCW did a lot more face versus face matches than WWE ever has. They didn't look at the good guy, bad guy too much around this time period. We were still very much in the Monday Night Wars, so this was a lot of gray area. It wasn't just black and white in the cartoon era. You had NWO Black and White, you had the NWO Red and Black Wolfpack, and then you had the WCW guys. And this was 2 WCW guys who were both faces going against each other. And DDP was the #1 contender for the title at the time, having won that at Fall Brawl in the previous pay-per-view. The anticipation for this match was so high because you had to pick a side. Anybody who was a Goldberg fan was also a DDP fan at the time. So you had to pick a side. You had to choose who you thought was going to come out of this match as the victor, and if there was anybody who we thought was a legitimate threat to the streak up until this point, it was Diamond Dallas Page. Now, This match, or this pay-per-view, is actually also iconic, not just for the set, but also for the infamous and horrible event that happened during this match, about 30 seconds maybe into the match. Anybody who had Dish TV, the pay-per-view cut out because they ran out of time. That's a pretty notorious story. The Hogan and Warrior match prior to it went way too long than it should have, and they ran out of time. I, fortunately, a 13-year-old as I was, I had DirecTV. I had no problems. In fact, God, this is aging me so horribly. I actually had a bedtime of 10 p.m. that I had to go to bed, and I had to miss a couple of these matches, but I recorded it on VCR, on a VHS tape, and I watched it the next morning. But the DirecTV that we had, there was no problems. I got to see the match in full. But anybody who had anything else like Dish or any other pay-per-view provider at the time, it cut out right at the beginning of this match, and so they ended up airing it the following Nitro for everybody. So that was very much a notorious match, and I cannot even begin to imagine what I would have been like had I experienced that, because my temper at the time was probably not as so to be able to handle something like that. All right, so the match itself. Here's a big question that everybody talks about, because when you look back at Goldberg's career, Goldberg is not a professional wrestler, and I say that with the greatest amount of respect. He didn't grow up as a wrestler. He didn't spend time in the indie scene and working on his technique. He was a monster that Eric Bischoff brought in to destroy the roster, and it was exactly the role he was intended to do, and it was a perfect role for him. I have kind of retired from giving Goldberg crap, because no, he's not a very skilled technical wrestler. His job was to squash people, and I give him a lot of credit for this match with DDP, because it ran maybe about 10 minutes total. It was a match. It wasn't a Bret Hart versus Chris Benoit type match. It was a DDP versus Goldberg type match. You had two very unique styles. Goldberg took over dominance at the very beginning, shoving DDP out of the way, but had enough resistance from DDP to make it look like he was a legitimate threat. So I will officially retire from giving Goldberg crap about doing nothing but squash matches, because looking back at this was highly entertaining. It was a lot of anticipation for it, and I felt he did an excellent job in the match itself. It was right around the mid-marker of the match where he missed a spear going into DDP into the corner and took the brunt of the ring post to his shoulder. It was at that moment in the match that you thought, this was it. This is something that's actually going to wear Goldberg down, and DDP is going to take the advantage. You think about Goldberg's athleticism, too. You look early on in this match, DDP misses a leg sweep, and Goldberg does a handstand flip. It was not the first or last time he's ever done that, but the athleticism of this guy was absolutely phenomenal. So towards more the end of the match, Goldberg hits a massive exploding spear onto DDP, but lays there. He sold it because his shoulder was still hurt. You saw him do a couple lifts one-handed with DDP, which turned into a diamond cutter, and at that point you thought this match was over. They didn't do as many of the false finishes that we know, where the crowd gets really big into the 1, 2, and the big pop there. So the timing on that false finish after the diamond cutter was a little bit off, but again, I don't think they really focused too much on false finishes back then. But he got a 2 count where DDP nearly got the title, but then ended up being the final outcome of the match. Goldberg hits a nearly one-handed jackhammer, planting DDP in the middle of the ring and taking the win. And it was a very satisfying match. I give this match, I don't do the whole star system, but this was a great match. This is a match that I would go back and watch. It amazes me how much I remember from it having being, seems like eons ago. And so I really enjoyed this match, and this was one of those things where you walk into it, this was their WrestleMania equivalent. I know Starrcade is technically their WrestleMania equivalent, but this was, if you try to find something to match it, it'd be their SummerSlam. This was their second tier pay-per-view, because you had Starrcade as the big one, Halloween Havoc was a big one, World War III Fall Brawl, those kind of pay-per-views were huge, and this was the main event of arguably the best pay-per-view of the year. I'm going to say that with a little grain of salt, because I'd have to go back and really look at it. I'm going to review Goldberg versus Kevin Nash coming up in the next couple weeks, but if I had to sit and watch a match from start to finish and had to pick between them, I would pick Goldberg versus DDP. And then obviously the best part about the ending of this match was the mutual respect between the two of them. There's a lot of heat going into the weeks coming up into Halloween Havoc, enough to where you had to pick a side, but the end result was two guys with mutual respect for each other hugging in the ring. DDP did the classy thing of bailing out and letting Goldberg take his victory lap, so to speak. And if you have the WWE Network, I highly encourage you to check out this match and let me know your own thoughts as well. I'd love to hear your opinions on it. I'd love to hear your take on it. What other matches at Halloween Havoc did you like? Because it was an amazing card, actually. Even at least on paper. Hogan versus Warrior on paper was, got a lot of buys. Great match between Bret Hart and Sting, which was actually Sting's last match as the Red and Black Wolfpack. He got injured. I don't know if it was a work or if it was shoot inside the ring, but he was out until the following Spring Stampede. I'm going to make that one up. I think that's what it was, where he came back as the Crow, Sting as well. And you had great matches between Scott Steiner and Rick Steiner. You had a double cross with Buff Bagwell. So this was a great pay-per-view. It was highly anticipated and was definitely worth and a lot of fun going back and reviewing it. So thank you guys so much. Let me know your comments and your thoughts. Also, let me know what matches you'd love us to review, and we will talk to you soon.